Okay, hello everyone. Hope you're in the right place. If you are um, either personally affected by change fatigue, or you're running a team that is feeling fatigued, or you've got that next change management and transformation initiative right in front of you and you're trying to figure out, well, what are we supposed to even do about this in 2026? You're in the right place. Whether that's for a little bit of catharsis or whether that's just for some real tangible advice, whether it's about tips that I feel are really relevant or client and stories to inspire you, you're in the right place for that as well. So I've got 8 rules to share today. They're really good 8 rules. I might be biased because they're called Josh's 8 rules, but I think they're really good rules. But before we get there, I really wanted to just quickly touch upon sort of the state of change today and what's really going on in the bigger picture as we drill down to what am I supposed to do with that next change initiative in front of me. And the first thing to really think about is, well, how much change is actually going on in the workplace right now? And this is probably one of the most jarring pieces of research that we have encountered in recent memory. And this comes from Gartner, talking about how in 2016, which feels like yesterday, even though that's a decade ago at this point, the average enterprise change. So we're talking about sort of bringing on a new system, or we're going to move this way in sort of our customer experience model, sort of a very large piece of change. The average change someone experienced in 2016 was probably at that stage, maybe 2. And in 2025, so just between a portion of 9 years, that number's changed to 13. Now, just think about how much change you encounter in your personal lives and how hard it is to change at that standpoint. So, what does that actually mean when that comes down in a place of work? And it's not just even the frequency of change, but it's the intensity of change that is something that we need to be really mindful of. It should come to no surprise of anyone in attendance today that we're all just feeling exhausted by change. And so as that volume of change goes up, that willingness to change goes down. And it's something that Gartner would call the transformation deficit, that big gap that you see over there. And you're seeing just the willingness and the appetite for change is just dwindled in recent memory. And that stat was taken from 2024. That's not even factoring the last 18 months or so, which I would say has just accelerated sort of the rate at which organizations need to pivot to the economy, to what's going on in the world, and how employees need to pivot from there. Probably to add to that, I read this last week as well too in the McLean report, which is just quite a stat in itself. About 12% of the people they surveyed reported not experiencing change fatigue. Just 12%. So we're feeling it. We're all feeling it. And if we're thinking about what Gardner would define as successful transformation, for them it would be change communication plus some quality training and then actively managing some fatigue management. I've got a particular view on that. We'll touch on it in a second. But the first point I wanted to make about sort of where we are with change right now is just the amount of change and the exhaustion tied to that change. So much so, actually, that this is a critical part of a key piece of work that we actually launched last year called Generation Numb. And it's a term that we use to kind of coin the sustained, accelerated overwhelm we've all been feeling. We all know what's going on in the world. We all know how it's affecting our organizations, and we all know how it's affecting our people. And Generation Numb is really this, it doesn't apply to one generation, but to anyone in the workplace right now who are feeling this post-pandemic AI forward type moment that we're all in right now. That numbness is really a key symptom of the workforce right now. It's hard to show up to work every day. Let's be honest about that. And it's even harder from the context of change, from everything I shared with you about just this relentless pace and intensity of change. It's hard for me to get excited about our customers when I'm worried about the price of bread. It's hard for me to meaningfully connect with my peers when I'm overwhelmed by everything that's going on at work, overwhelmed by everything going on outside of work. How am I supposed to meaningfully connect to the work? That's everything Generation Numb talks about in terms of outlining the malady, but also about how we move forward from that. And so if you haven't checked it out yet, first of all, shame on you. But secondly, if you haven't checked it out yet, we're going to drop in a link right now for you to access the white paper. Well worth your time. It is a really great read. And it'll help you kind of paint the picture of what's going on in the workplace and what can we reasonably do about it. And then the third piece I wanted to talk about when it comes to change is, well, there's an elephant in the room. And get ready for about 50 more minutes of elephant talk because that is one of the things I really want you to walk away with today. Jonathan Haidt, sort of this pop social psychologist, he's got some great books out there. There's one, his most recent book is actually about the anxious generation and sort of our addiction to devices, particularly in young people. But in one of his previous books, The Happiness Hypothesis, he had this really elegant metaphor for how the brain works. And he says, imagine that our minds, our brains, certainly the decision-making part of our brains, works like a rider sitting on top of an elephant. And if you think about these two parts of the brain, the rider and the elephant, it's a really great way to understand how we look at change, how we approach change, and how we make decisions. So the rider is that rational individual. They're the ones that tell you to eat your veggies and to exercise more. They're the ones that chart the course. But the elephant is the emotional side, the one that prefers stories, the one that sees what the other elephants are doing. And what I love so much about this is imagine a rider trying to ride an elephant. I don't know if anyone here has actually ridden an elephant. They're massive creatures. The closest I've come to is riding a camel, and that was actually hell. So I can't imagine what an elephant looks like. But imagine a rider trying to take the course of an elephant and say, we need to go this way. An elephant is strong and powerful and says, well, actually, I prefer the default method. I prefer moving in this direction. And while you're telling me that I need to wake up every day at 4 a.m. because early morning winners seize the day, I actually just want to press that snooze button. And this constant tension between the rider and the elephant is just a perfect metaphor for our approach to change, specifically at work. And if you ask me, we spend way too much time in our change programs focusing on the rider and not enough in the elephant. And so if you ever grabbed a coffee with me, I've probably said this to you a couple of times to the point that you're quite annoyed by it. The business world needs more elephant content. And so in the context of change, how much are we spending time speaking to the elephant? Keep that in mind, the elephant and the rider concept, because I'm going to draw upon it as I touch on the 8 rules I want to share with you today. So some quick headlines for where we're at in 2026. Just in case you weren't feeling it, to substantiate it a little bit further, change fatigue, intensity of change is at an all-time high. Numbness is really that X factor that's getting in the way for a lot of different reasons. It's the response to chronic overwhelm that we've all been feeling, certainly in the last couple of years. How do we overcome numbness? And what's the role of us as change agents in terms of addressing numbness head on? And then finally, what are we doing to meaningfully speak to the elephant? And more than anything, I think you're here for a reason because you understand it. But if there's one thing you need to be doing in 2026, you hear this all the time, certainly in large organizations, we're all in sales now. Well, my version of that is actually we're all in change now. And the most important skill for any organization, I hear this so much when speaking to clients today, is that we just need to get change ready. Whether it's at their leadership level or on an individual level, what's your plan to help people navigate always on change in the background of this? The good news is I've got some ideas that can help you propel that forward. So welcome. We're out of the gate. Hi, everyone. My name is Josh. I'm the Chief Creative and Learning Officer at Sponge Group. Had the privilege of some great roles in my career and tackling a who's who of industries, mostly in the Fortune 500 space, taking on topics from everything from tech training to tire physics to AI enablement and change readiness. And I think I really exist to help organizations understand how you can unlock what learning can do within your organization that's far beyond the learning itself. That's a picture of the favorite meal I've ever had in my life in Tokyo. It's a bowl of ramen. It costs less than $10. I still think about it almost every week. That's my favorite Beatles album. And my secret skill is that I'm on a 3,000-day learning streak. That's actually a lie. I'm on a 3,098-day learning streak. Mostly German, but now I've entered a millennial dad stage and I've taken on chess, which I find quite exhilarating as well, too. And I want you to walk away to really understand that the way in which we learn at work is so critical to any change that you're talking about. So we got a learning specific slant here for how you can really activate change in a really special way. So here we go. We're out of the gate. already given you a picture of our always on world, but I wanted to walk you through some really practical tips and strategies for how to look at change management through a people enablement lens. I'm going to give you a playbook for that you can take today and say, follow these 8 rules, dig deep into these 8 rules, and you'll be on the right side of taking change quite seriously. Got a lot of resources to share with you, which I'm really happy to share. And of course, some really great client stories, because examples are the best way that we learn and teach, certainly in terms of giving you inspiration to talk about with your stakeholders and say, hey, well, that org is doing it. Maybe we should be thinking about it as well, too. And then my sort of one huge piece of advice is I need you to cross the line. That's it today. That's all you need to remember. Cross the line. What's the line? Ooh, that's a tease. We're going to find out in a few minutes. And then secondly, I hopefully want you to understand that everything has changed, including in our personal lives as well too. So maybe you might find some tips here that might help you in your personal life. And of course, getting you to constantly think about elephants. The world needs more elephant content. I'm going to give you some elephant content today. So shall we dive into our 8 rules? Let's do that. I wanted to start here because, the thing about change is that we all kind of look at it as our own precious little snowflake. It always feels unique in the context of what we're going through because change is tough. But really, and they've been studying change management in the business world for over 100 years. And this is one of my favorite things to really kind of frame changes, like just understand how normal change is. And so these are the 5 key quests of change management that most large organizations go through. Pick your lane. And I'm sure you've encountered this in your career at least once. And you're probably taking on a version of a couple of these things at once as well, too, whether it's about reconfiguring your operating model, your customer experience, or just even your business processes. AI enablement, AI adoption is probably the critical change management challenge of our times. And that kind of fits into a lot of these things too. So understand that change is quite normal for any organization, but it's what we do with that is where the challenge is. And that is because change is just often really poorly managed. And so I kind of cheekily wanted to come back to, Gardner's recommendation there of, well, just kind of do some good comms, do some good training, manage your fatigue management, and bubbly boom, you've got some great successful transformation. But this doesn't go further enough for me. And why this doesn't work is because one, it's overly rational, speaking more to the writer than to the elephant. It's overly transactional. We're not missing we're not factoring the human factor of what that is. And go take a look at the Generation Num white paper for you to really understand the difference between sort of transactional versus really reading the room. It's usually quite vague. It forgets about people. And, in these times where authenticity and slop everywhere is really a critical theme of what makes people feel alive at work, what's the role of authenticity in really having a meaningful change management program? So what that actually ends up looking like is, well, you get one of these types of emails. And really, for all of us on the other side of that email, we kind of do one of these. Yes, this is one of my favorite memes, and I probably share it every week with my colleagues. But that's kind of how we're feeling about the disconnect, right? That disconnect of what's really going on in my day-to-day work and what that change looks like when it's passed down from leadership to just say, now go. And a huge part of this, if you ask me, is, well, what's your value system tied to change? And, I think a lot about sort of the identity that we have and the habits around the identity that we have. And the way that I would frame is find your value system and you'll find how you approach change. If you think that change is really a top-down initiative and a training problem and a comms problem or a one-off thing and quite linear, well, I will poke the habits that show up that show you that. But if you think change is actually really hard, really messy, kind of goes a little bit like this, fully unpredictable, it's gonna have some moments of failure, and you really need to lean into vulnerability versus just polished comms, well, you'll have a very different value system for how you want to approach it. And that's what I really want to lean into. And that's what I mean about crossing the line. So, what is the line? This is the line. On this side of the line is where the rider's in control. On the other side is where the elephant endures. This is where we do all the talking about change, but all the actual change happens on this side of the line. So none of the change happens here, and all of the change happens there. And the problem is that the line is where most organizations stopped. Why? Because on that side of the line is where everything is in your realm of control. And boy, do we love our control when it comes to change in organizations. On the other side is, well, the messiness of it all, where it's unstructured, where it's more vulnerable. And this is where I need you to come with me on this journey of we need to get across the line. And today is about 8 rules that'll help you cross that line. It's about bold people enablement because that's the type of people enablement that we need right now at work to not only just have successful change initiatives and give them the best shot that we can, but to also have people feel something and feel part of the change because that's when change feels the easiest. So rule 1 is, and I think I've already kind of painted a landscape around this, is understand the larger landscape of change. And it's really important for you, for everyone who's attending today, to just on your own really start upskilling your own journey of what's going on in the world of change and how can I be a better change leader. I shared with you some really quick stats on the intensity of change, the frequency of change, what's going on in Generation We actually did a really great webinar a few months back on sort of more of the theory and the best of what's going on in the world of change right now. We'll drop it in the chat for you. Have a poke at it because I think it'd be really great for you to get a larger sense of some theory of different frameworks you can use to approach change that'll really kind of give you more confidence approaching the rest of these rules. So understand the larger landscape of change there. Go back, check out that webinar, check out the Generation Num piece. I think that'll really help you get more confidence of, oof, there's a lot for me to arrive at before I decide to turn my change program on. So that's rule 1. Rule 2 is get that marquee why moment right. In my experience working with professionals who are trying to embark on a change program, we intuitively just gravitate towards the what. I know what needs to happen, and this is what the change is coming. Now go do the change. But this is that difference between the elephant and rider content. Rider content is what? And the elephant content is why. Why are we here? Why do we exist? Why this change? Why now? And I call it a marquee why moment because you really only have one good moment to get this right up front. It's really hard to get people inspired in these times. But having authenticity and radical transparency about why your org is going through its change, you'd be surprised how many people lean into that to say, great, it's not perfect, but at least I understand now. And this is really important to have that sort of adult to adult communication over here, not necessarily parent to child, but really adult to adult, where respect my authority, respect my autonomy, and treat me as an adult about why exactly this change is coming. Super important in how you want to communicate that change. And let me share with you an example actually from a big player in the professional services industry of a why experience that we help in terms of their change program. So here, this was about fostering cross collaboration across the business, sort of a typical pain point for any professional services firm. You've got an army of consultants that are incentivized in one way or another, and you're trying to get them to work together. To create more value for the business, to create more value for their customers. And so this idea of how do I incentivize you to better collaborate with your peers, work together on deals? What we ended up doing was actually not sort of a straightforward comms piece, but actually a game. We called it the business lifecycle game. And it followed around sort of 3 key variables of profit, networking, and value to help people understand the why of successful collaboration. So really put this in the heart of navigating a business simulation of walking through a client to then say, hey, you make these decisions and it could affect this variable or that variable or that variable. So it's a little bit of an unorthodox approach to just say, well, we want you to understand why this is so important. Play this game, play this simulation. So just an interesting lens of how you can think about why. Let people play a game, let people embark in a simulation, and let them come to their own conclusions about it. And this has been such a successful piece for this organization that we're actually working on a V2 version right now that is pivoting and reflecting their evolving strategy at present. So just a good example of you could even just lay the bones of a good why experience that can be cascaded to the next change initiative that needs to come your way. The next rule is about creating room for when it doesn't go well. I think this is really just the naivete of all of us who are responsible for change programs to just say, well, let's plan it all out perfectly, and then let's just roll it out, roll it out, roll it out. But change is hard. Change is messy, much like learning is hard and learning is messy. It doesn't necessarily follow this amazing linear line. You will have points where things change, or you will have points where things aren't working well, and that's okay. And in fact, lean into the vulnerability of when things don't go okay. So let me give you first a micro example of what that could look like on a learning design level. This is one of my favorite learning models. It comes from Mosher and Gottfredson, the 5 moments of need. And we tend to over-index on the left side there, formal instruction to say, well, actually, the moments of need that really matter the most are the two on the left. When I would actually argue that the moments that matter the most are the moments on the right. So what do you do when you're trying to remember or when things change or when something goes wrong? How do you design for those moments? And so if you haven't encountered this framework before, really challenge yourself to think, how much am I spending time designing for those first 2 moments and not enough for those 3 moments on the right side as well too. So just a really powerful lens to think about, how am I going to design for agility and nimbleness? One of the ways we did this was for a luxury retailer where we were trying to create brand ambassadors for their shop floor associates. And one of the simple kind of analog ways, but a powerful way to do it, is we printed out these really large poster board customer cards so that when you're trying to build more of a brand ambassador, when a customer walks in, we could go in the back, pull out, oh, I think this is a Lux Luminary type persona, and get a quick sort of sense of, oh, this is what you need to remember about this persona next time you try and encounter them. So yes, we did the learning the first time piece. We did something upfront that was elegant and formal and packaged well. But what about when things don't go well, when you're trying to remember something? What's the performance aid tool or support tool that can help people in their moment of need? So just a quick way of being agile to what people need. So that's a micro example. Let me give you more of a macro example. This is an example where we worked with a big pharma company where they were trying to merge their training teams together, where they had one training team that was really focused on sort of more soft skill expertise, and another training team that was a team of medical experts, science experts, that obviously had strong SME expertise, but still was responsible for building learning content. So we're trying to bring these two teams together, overcome some silent behavior, and do some consistent learning experiences. And so we worked with this client to build a resource hub that we thought, okay, great. Let's equip them with great ways of working, methodologies, tools. But what we quickly found out was actually it wasn't the what that they were necessarily interested in, but the why. And we realized quite quickly, oh, we didn't spend enough time talking to the elephant. We didn't spend enough time talking about their reaction to this idea of two teams coming together and what this means for them. So we actually pivoted sort of the content strategy of that resource hub away from the what content, oversimplification, to more of the why content. And so just the agility to even say, hey, you know what? Our bad. We kind of screwed up, but we're moving this in a direction that feels more aligned to what you need at present. It feels, it's a little bit of having humble pie, but at the same time, the uptake of it ends up being much more authentic. And something else that we ended up doing as well too, to recognizing that, you can't pre-plan for content, and I use content quite specifically as a word there. We ended up giving the team over there training templates for more agile content, so that if you actually needed to pivot further, they had everything that they needed to do it, and they didn't necessarily need to rely on us to have sort of high-end, super polished content as well too. So just create space. Create space when things don't go well, because things aren't going to go swimmingly all the time. And that's kind of the point. That is the human course of change. All right, 3 rules. The fourth rule is, we'll document that journey together. This comes back to the elephant. I told you I'd keep talking about elephants. This keeps coming back to the elephant. And one of the ways to succeed with the elephant is, one, tell it stories. We are natural story learners. And two, tell it what the other elephants are doing. We love a good amount of social proof, whether it's social pressure or just even social joy. But we love the fact that we're on a journey together. And so how do you make sure that you document that journey together so that when you've got that why moment, that marquee why moment, it's cascaded into a why journey that we're all on together? Here's a little bit more of a tactical one that was actually quite helpful. So this was a compliance training that we did for Tesco, one of the largest supermarket chains in the UK. And this was just a really fun way of just showing people, in a sort of reductionist way, you could say, well, this was our kind of push mechanism from a compliance standpoint to make sure that everyone's taking the training. But we just added sort of a creative motif on top of it to say, here's where the rest of your colleagues are in terms of completing this training. And of course, we leaned into the brand. We talked about, oh, well, I'm on the shelf, I'm in the basket, in the bag, kind of fun. And then we also showed where the teams sit next to each other. So even at its worst, it's a kind of a way to nudge teams to say, hey, get going. But at its best, it helps me understand that I'm part of something bigger than myself, which typically, when we're talking about change, is an individual journey, but it's just as much a team journey as well, too. So create moments where people feel part of that journey and make sure you document it and keep it up and front and center with your team, because then they'll feel like, one, it's top of mind for them, but two, they actually feel like they are part of this in a communal way. All right. So I don't want to play favorites with my rules, but I think this one might be my favorite. And if there's one rule that I would actually say, if, Josh, which of the 8 rules should I really take on? I would probably say it's this one because it's the hardest. And it's the hardest because when you actually lean into it, you will actually be able to then say, oh, I feel like there's meaningful and change that I can navigate around this. And I wanted to share a story actually from a Fortune 100 company that we've been working with, where their key enterprise capability for this year, or one of them, was storytelling. And what we did was created an experience for them that really took a shift away from knowledge. It's not that the knowledge piece wasn't there. It's just that we needed to extract that knowledge piece into behaviors. And one of the ways that we actually approached it was we literally took a page from the great book Atomic Habits. And we said, well, you know what? A key part of how we build better habits is to shift from outcome-based habits to identity-based habits. What does that mean? Well, take an example of, and this is where I was talking about earlier, about show me your identity and I'll show you your habits. One of the great pieces that shows up in James Clear's book is understand the identity that you have and then build the habits around it. So it's less about I use more storytelling at work, but by saying I'm a storyteller. Or to take it in a personal life, oh, I don't smoke, versus I'm trying to stop smoking. And if you just come in through the outcomes, it becomes a lot harder to penetrate the identity. But if you build it around the identity, you have a better chance of building the habits that you want. And so one of the ways that we took inspiration from that was actually taking the idea of storytelling and breaking it down into personas and saying, well, actually, you can take on a bunch of different identities in terms of your path of being a better storyteller in your organization. And so we actually designed these personas. And then when it came time to bringing in those storytelling frameworks, all of a sudden you've got an identity that you could gravitate yourself towards. And so the target habit here, not necessarily the knowledge, because it's really easy here to just say, here's some storytelling frameworks. You've got all the knowledge. Now go be a better storyteller. This was more about how do I get you to start embedding storytelling frameworks that we're going to teach you about to prep for a critical meeting. So something very specific in terms of a habit. Just to give you a sort of a textbook definition of a habit versus a goal, is a habit is something that you could do right now. I can drink water right now. That's a habit. I could drink water 5 minutes from now. So if I can ask you to do something in a particular moment, then all of a sudden you've got a sticky habit. So how do you build sticky habits versus just knowledge? You have to really remember that when it comes to change, the first question people need to ask themselves is, what's in it for me? What do you want me to do? What exactly do you want me to do? And that's often the gap in change management and people enablement in particular, is that you got to script the critical moves and you got to help people understand this is what I need you to do. And this is what it looks like in terms of behaviors and habits. Another key part of the story that's quite a success, because this is quite topical, is that we also used AI and integrated this into their LLM. So then that way they were able to just retrieve that storytelling framework and embed it in their prep work as well too. So there's a successful story of how you can really point towards habits while still, taking on the key knowledge component that is necessary to any change program. So that's one that's very specific to building habits. But I also want to talk about the value of what happens when you convert that into, well, habits and behaviors. We're working with a big tech firm. You probably know who they are, from really moving from vanity metrics to valuable metrics. And so what we actually did was part of designing in the training itself, is that we built a risk profile assessment within the training that actually gave us a much more meaningful profile of what impact looks like. What that's focused less on completion and likability and I intend to towards things like risk judgment, confidence, and behavioral readiness. Now, and I think probably a lot of us in the call today understand the difference between the left side and the right side of this table here of moving from sort of vanity metrics of engagement, likability, and completion, which in a compliance setting is really helpful, to moving towards a place where actually I get to have a much clearer sense of what's in the head of my team right now, which from a change management perspective is really important, is that you need to understand that this is a journey. So getting as much data as possible about your team is going to be really helpful for you to understand where to go next. So there's not only just a payoff in terms of pointing towards habits and behaviors in terms of end user benefit, but there's a huge amount of business benefit to you and the business about there's an opportunity here for us to really capture data around behaviors that we're trying to target so that we know we're moving in the right direction. So you can see this is a really powerful fifth rule, because when you orient less away from knowledge and more towards habit, you're not only reducing sort of that over-indexing on rider stuff, but you're also moving towards giving real clarity to people on what do you need me to actually do? If I need to change, what does change look like for me tomorrow? It's hard work, but I guarantee you it'll pay off in terms of getting more uptick from your people to say, right, I may not agree with the change, or it might take a while for me to overcome the resistance to it, but I definitely do have a clear sense of what exactly you need me to do that needs to change. Okay, let me take a quick drink of water over here to recognize my habits. We're all trying to have a better habit of drinking more water, which I very much suck at. Number 6, get the balance right between structured and unstructured. This I really think speaks to the line, and the line of letting go more than anything else. It's so easy to dwell on structured parts because, well, that's all in the realm of control, especially when we need to convince our senior stakeholders, especially when we need to have a plan and say, well, how do I know I'm going to get the right ROI from this? That all ends up in the structured space. But really successful change is about getting the balance right between those two. Trusting the individuals that you give the keys to and say, this is the direction of the change. I don't really know what comes next, but I trust that you'll be able to feed that back in as to where we should go next. And I think the really important thing to understand is that you just can't script everything, which is scary, to be honest with you. This is just a great sort of formal table that I got from a great resource, which I'll share with you at the end, about the different formal interventions that you can have. And it's important for us to have those structures when it comes to alignment or to move as one or to set really clear expectations. So you need that formal side, that structured side, but you also very much need that unstructured side. So where we need less structure is, well, I don't really have the answer, but let's go try it. And let's go try it. And let's also make sure that we have space for when we fail. And failure is okay. Or when I actually need to delegate this to the power of the room to understand, well, where we go next in our change chapter actually belongs to you, not to me as a leader or not to me as someone who needs to formalize the package around it. So getting this balance right between formal and informal, and it is really a balance that's unique to your organization, so I can't necessarily prescribe it to you at this juncture. Getting that structure, that balance between structure and unstructured, right, is so healthy and so important to get people on the change journey with you. Know the limits of what you can potentially speak to or navigate or script the critical moves towards, and then know when to just let go. And it's a vulnerable moment, but it's a really powerful moment. Let me give you another great example from another professional services firm that we worked with who brought us along the journey to say, hey, can you help us be more creative as a team? First of all, fantastic brief. But secondly, this was a great one about just sort of what does it even mean to be creative? And the balance here that we brought in structured and unstructured, and for any of those that are familiar with sort of learning terms, is we just really bias towards a flipped learning model. So we came in with very little knowledge and actually just a lot of strategies. And we just said, we're going to give you a bunch of strategies today, but we're not going to tell you how to do it. We're just going to tell you these strategies exist. And when you're in the flow of work and when you're thinking about being more novel in your thinking or how to generate more ideas, you'll have all the strategies that you need in order to do that. And sort of the PS, the resistance that was that was something that I was quite a fan on, was that the tool to walk away with was not a deck, was not a playbook, but really what you see over there, which was just a stress group. So they walked away with 6 core strategies that we spent a half day walking them through, giving them some confidence in being able to put some structure around ideation and creative thinking, and then said, next time you're in a bind, go roll the dice. Go roll the dice, and any of these strategies will help you find a breakthrough in your ideation. So finding that moment of letting go and saying, actually, we trust you. You know what you need to be able to do, feeling confident in your capability, and then just letting them go through it, getting that balance right between structured and unstructured, super important. All right, we're doing okay. 6 rules down, 2 more to go. The 7th one is about remembering your prone points. Now, everything that I've spoken about is quite huge. It's quite a lot to take on. And so you need to manage your own change of fatigue in terms of, man, how do I make this a much more focused problem? And so if you were to say, Josh, I don't have the time for a lot of these things, is there a way for me to cut through the noise a bit more? Yeah. Go to the 2 target areas that matter the most, management and grassroots. Help empower management to better understand how they can cascade the change, and help the grassroots level, whether it's those that are most customer facing or those that are most affected by the change, help those individuals really understand what they need to be able to do. So let me give you sort of for those that are thinking more tactically in terms of a change program, let me give you an example of how these pieces can all kind of come together. And I would really classify this as modern people enablement in this particular moment of change that we're in right now. So, you've got, and let's see the line right there that's drawn. So on this side of the line, you've got that traditional initial comms. You might want to do a drip campaign. You're really getting that marquee why moment, high emotional content, making people feel something, a real important moment for authenticity, if you ask me. So how do you speak directly to the elephant in that? But crossing the line means, well, let's continue to document that journey. So don't just have a one-off why moment, but have continual check-ins where when we win together. When we lose together, but we're quite transparent about it. Report on what's working and what's not working. So once again, show me this as a change journey and not just a one-off moment of everybody go change. And especially bring out the voices of those that are experiencing the change the most. This is those moments here where if you're a leader, get out of the way. Get out of the way and let the voices of those that are most affected by change be vulnerable and honest about what's working, what's not working. And you're just going to build more momentum around really taking the change seriously. On the other side of the line, you've got that traditional what. And so I'm not here to tell you don't put any what content in. That part is still really important. We still need to make sure that whatever's been approved by the C-suite, what's been approved by senior leadership, that still is a clear message that has been communicated. Perhaps there's some off-the-shelf generic pieces here to help supplement the what. That's necessary. But what does it mean to cross the line? Well, crossing the line is what I would call yes and content for any improv fans that we have today. And that is teaching people about change itself. So I've given you a real quick whistle-stop tour about sort of the nature of change. Imagine you taught people who are affected by change about that, about how just normal change actually is. One of the things in there is also about commercial acumen. And if I were to talk about, 2 critical skills in this day and age, helping people navigate change, and tied to that is just helping your people understand how the business makes money. Because often that's a key part of why we need to change as an organization, as business. So it feels weird to say, but having people have more empathy for the business and the mechanics of it actually helps make the change become a little bit more palatable, regardless of resistant. So if you haven't thought about a yes and bucket, this is a great way to think about, okay, the core of my change, but how do I help people make the change, shrink the change to make it feel better? Another way, as I mentioned about focusing on the prone points, is just focus on the critical audience essentials. Come back to that piece about pointing towards habits and not knowledge. So it might be difficult for you to talk about habits and critical moves for everyone that might be affected by change, go to the pieces, and if you're not familiar with the Pareto principle, it's like focus on the 20% that could produce 80% of the value. So who's in that critical audience, and then focus on them in terms of being sort of the beacon for you need to do this tomorrow in terms of the change. And tied to that is, well, playbooks. Script those moves. How exactly do we get there? How do I enable my managers, my leaders to then say, well, I'm going to teach you how to feed yourself in terms of building better habits, building better moment of need content. This is a great place for using AI to sort of scale this and personalize this on a coaching and feedback level. A really helpful place as well, too, in terms of the how is scorecards. I find that's really helpful. So if you're moving in a direction of, well, we now write our proposals this way in a sales context, give me a template, give me a scorecard for that. Put a number on the board of, well, now we can score this out of 10. And what the way we used to do proposals were 6 and 7s out of 10s. The new way we should be doing 8 and 9s out of 10. That's something that's just really simple for people to tangibly hook themselves onto and say, I have a very clear sense of where I need to go. And there's one metric by which I can tell whether we're winning or we're losing. That's the power of scorecards. So really try and simplify your change into a number or a color coding system or a ranking system that people can go and show up every day and say, are we winning or are we losing? Are we moving towards the change or are we moving against the change? And the key part of that as well, too, is about equipping your leadership to become better change leaders. So how can you use leadership to better cascade that change better? And I think a key part of this as well, too, is when you're crossing the line, know that you're not alone. So find your guiding coalition. And that's a very specific Cotter term in change management for anyone who's familiar with the Cotter's model for change. Find your village. That's probably the way that I would say it. Find your village of those who are willing to come on the change journey with you and co-construct with them. So definitely don't feel like you need to do all of this and then put it at people. Let it come from within the group of the right caliber of yes and content or the right level of detail for how exactly we get there in playbooks. This is a good opportunity for doing user-generated content as well, too. So crossing that line of vulnerability is also about handing the keys to the team, to those that are affected by it, and say, can you help me cascade this journey further? You'd be surprised how much help you actually will get. So then that way you don't feel the pressure of figuring out this messiness. We figure out the messiness together. So that's a lot, but it just hopefully gives you some mechanics of, okay, Josh, I need to build my change program tomorrow. What's missing? Here's a good example of things that you might want to consider in your next change initiative that you might be having to run. So that is huger. That's the maximalist version of what am I going to do with my change program, which brings me to my very last rule, which I think is a really special rule when you factor in everything that's going on in the world right now. We need to remember that we're in a moment of just constant overwhelm. Whether we're overwhelmed in our digital lives, whether we're overwhelmed in our personal lives, we're overwhelmed by the amount of change that's going on at work and how we need to show up every day. So the eighth rule, if the first 7 rules is really about sort of the science and mechanics of change, the eighth rule is really about how we take science into art. And that is, for everything that I've just told you, then also take a step back and say, now reduce and do less. Because one of the things that's really important when we're talking about change is cognitive load. And so how do you embrace the power of subtraction in trying to do change meaningfully? And I wanted to share one of my favorite stories of recent memory, and it's probably because I was personally involved with the experience. We did this with an organization, the consumer goods space, and we were working with their global capability leads on how do we build better capability as an organization with the entire organization. And so the key topics here were some really core human skills that are really tough from a change management standpoint in terms of asking better questions, developing more empathy, really taking behavioral change properly. And so we had a three-day face-to-face event. And really the idea that sparked everything for a theme was, well, what if we just did the whole thing without slides? Which, to be honest with you, if you're a super senior leader, sounds quite scary. So getting the right seniors sponsorship is really important there because you're trying to talk about, well, how will we know work actually happened? But we did 3 days without slides, and we really stripped it down. Really, it was about less is more. A key mantra for us as a working team was do less, but do it better. And it was a focus on people and not necessarily content. And this was such an important moment from a change perspective. And I always remember the quote that I heard at the end of the experience where someone said, well, I've forgotten that you could actually do work without a laptop. And I've forgotten how energizing it was. And this is really about elephant content, elephant content, elephant content. That yes, there's so much pressure on us as change leaders to get through the what. There's so much pressure on us to say, oh, well, it's going to cost a lot of money to bring all of us together. We better make sure that we accomplish something. Is that yes, you can accomplish a lot more by doing less potentially. So think about what is this moment of subtraction that could actually be the most powerful moment in your change program. In this particular moment, it was going fully analog. You're seeing a picture there of fish because we spent a half day going to the aquarium, which ended up being one of the biggest highlights of the moment in there. What's this moment of subtraction that actually allows you to do more? Okay, 8 bold rules. And I hope that they feel bold to you, and I hope that they feel scary to you because then we're on the right track. None of these things are easy, but I guarantee you, if you find your village, it's actually a lot of fun. And anytime, certainly working with my team and working with larger teams within stakeholders that we work with, getting people to embrace these 8 rules and getting buy-in is so important. But once you do, then it just opens up a new vision for radical change that I think all of us on today's call is really seeking. We know the old ways of working is not happening. The legacy approaches to change is not working. We need a new playbook. I don't necessarily have the written playbook, although I should probably think about it. But I've certainly got a direction that all of you can go in today. So I hope these 8 rules really help you. A lot of the things that I shared with you today a lot of it was inspired by these resources I put in front of you. I already shared Atomic Habits. If you haven't read Switch yet, Switch is a really great one. I've been talking so much about the elephant and the rider. They basically wrote a book on how you unlock that with the elephant and the rider. And so I think about the Switch framework a lot. And of course, HBR does great content. And of course, the OG of change, John Cotter himself as well too. I'm an avid reader. If you've got some great talk about subtraction, in times where things needs to move incredibly fast, I prefer to slow down with a good book because that helps me think. So if you've got a great book for me, please let me know. So a big thank you for your time today. If there's 3 things I need you to walk away with is 1, just understand what's going on. Understand what's going on, both externally and internally. Understand how hard it is to show up to work every day and understand what that means when we have a change ask in front of our people. If you're going to take your next change initiative seriously, you're going to need to have a bolder plan. And I shared with you 8 strategies today for you to have a much bolder approach. Try any one of these. Let me know how it goes. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn, or if you know me personally, please reach me. Let me know how it goes. And I'd love to know what's working and what's not working and trying to take these 8 bold rules further. And then finally, and hopefully I'm preaching to the choir at this point, just understand that change is just not a rational exercise. Whether we're navigating personal change in our lives or we're trying to just get our family to change and we're trying to get our colleagues to change, it's not a rational thing. So don't over-index on it. Speak to the elephant, over-index on that emotional side, that story-driven side, that social proof side, that subtraction side, because we need to understand how hard change is in this moment. But the good news is, follow these 8 rules and you'll be on the right side of navigating that. Cool. Lovely. We're here. We did it. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope that you got something out of this that was of value to you. If you liked the flavor of how much I rambled, please get in touch with me. If you liked what you heard today and you want to just get more, please get in touch with us. And you've got links in the chat tied to looking at that past webinar, looking at Generation That's your homework. It's really good homework. I really encourage you to go do that. And please reach out to me or reach out to us if any of this stuff feels relevant or you got a sort of a challenge that's quite naughty that you need some help on nodding. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to quickly maybe stop sharing and see if there's anything in the chat that is something I can answer that's live. Great quick question from Megan. What can you do when you miss the marquee moment? I think it's never too late to have a marquee moment. So perhaps you didn't have your marquee moment and the change is out the gate. I would say the best thing you can do when you don't have a marquee moment is follow it up with a really authentic moment. So if maybe that supposedly marquee moment didn't land, and in my experience, maybe that didn't land is because, well, it was a bit tone deaf, perhaps, or it didn't factor in the people that are actually being affected by it. This is your moment for a mea culpa and say, hey, we've been hearing from you. And so we actually want to address these things head on. Let's do a town hall. Let's do a Q&A. And let's kind of use this as a revisionist comms moment to say, well, our bad on what we thought was a marquee why moment, but actually here's the why story that you need to know. So I hope that helps. Fantastic question. Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. I know we're all really busy people. Have a great day, and hopefully I hear from you on LinkedIn about how things are going. Take care, everyone.